key to accrue knowledge and use it strategically to affect things, and that is your power, is objectivity. Now, you can get there with psychedelics and meditation. You can get there by looking at yourself as a character in a story and looking at it as part of a narrative, because when you do that, you begin to see, how is this going to affect everything around me? And doing that is not only super effective in terms of business and branding. It's how you begin to make your brand make sense, or evolve the storytelling, or help people go down the steps of a funnel. It's also been the most healing way to approach trauma for me. For example, and I know this has been a night full of very dark stories, and we don't need to go there for much of it, but I will quickly tell you that I grew up in an abusive household. My dad was very abusive to me. I'll just give you one highlight from the highlight reel, and that is when I was 7 years old, I clumsily knocked over a bottle of Scope mouthwash. And being terrified of the possible repercussions, because even then I knew what they might be, I spilled about a third of the bottle, and I refilled it with water from the tap, which diluted it very obviously, but to my keen 7-year-old eye seemed like I might get away with this shit. I did not. When questioned about this, I did the obvious thing. I lied. And this became a habit in my life, by the way. That instinct to avoid trauma, to look at everyone questioning me about anything I had done as a potential physical danger, just was installed in me like software, and I just kept lying about shit until I eventually unpacked all that stuff. But I wouldn't discover that for 2 decades at least. At this particular time, it seemed like a good idea, and my dad was like, oh, okay. Turned around, immediately spun back on his heel, and he hit me. And he didn't quite punch me, and I wouldn't call it a slap. It was an open-handed hit that it took the side of my head, and my ears started ringing. I was slammed to the ground. The breath was knocked from my body, first by hitting the ground, and then by the 2 swift kicks to my ribs that my father delivered, one of which broke my rib and collapsed my lung. To this day, I only have 60% capacity in my right lung. I am not a good swimmer, because I am, in addition to not being built for it, as I am like a meat popsicle, I can't create the buoyancy, because my oxygen exchange is fucked up. And that's where within the context of my narrative, everything that has happened around water creates some sort of trauma for me. But it wasn't until I started really looking at this and writing about this, and actually the first screenplay I ever wrote was about my relationship with my father, and having to look at the character who was an analog for me as a character with real motivations forced me to step back and be objective about all of this stuff. It also forced me to look at the character of my father in a different way and think about, what are his motivations, right? At that character, take him out, he's no longer the villain. The people in your story, in their stories, aren't villains. So if you take him out, and he's not the villain, he's not this abused, the specter of my imposing father. He's a man who at some point in his life was handed a baby boy, and in that moment didn't think, I can't wait to break this kid's fucking ribs. I know he didn't. There's no way that happened. That's not how people work. Something along the lines of his life happened to the extent that it affected his development, that at some point it became a reasonable response to break a 7-year-old's ribs when that kid spilled a bottle of Scope mouthwash. That sounds absolutely fucking insane when you speak that out loud. And I don't think there's any context under which that's not insane, except the context of all of the abusive shit my father himself went through. But writing that screenplay and using him as a character, as an analog, doing storytelling about my father, that's what allowed me 10 years of fucking therapy, and I couldn't process my anger with my dad. It wasn't, not that we have a relationship to speak of now, but what allowed me to process it was writing the screenplay, was looking at him as a character and having to give him motivation, having to flesh him out as a 3-dimensional character and not just a monster. And I interviewed people in my family and found out more stuff about his backstory. And growing up, he was this fucking terrifying figure to me. And I spoke to my uncle, who's also my godfather, who is gay, came out, he was born in 1960, grew up in New York City in the 70s when being gay was very scary and not quite as trendy as it is now. And you weren't doing it just to be a good stand-up comedian or mediocre stand-up comedian. But he told me, he's like, your dad was the first person I ever came out to. He always made me feel safe. When I used to bring my boyfriends home to meet my family, I was bringing them to your parents' house. And so it gave me this entirely different look at this person. And so however you can get there, whether it's through plant medicines, whether it's through storytelling, whether it's through meditation, getting to a point where you can step back 2 or 3 paces and view yourself as a character in the story and view the other people as characters in the story, that objectivity, fostering the ability to hold that objectivity, is one of the most valuable things I've ever done. And I believe that for you, it will be one of the most valuable things you can do, because you can start to see how and why people make the decisions that they do. Because once you remove in stupid, base descriptions like evil and mean and wrong, people are making decisions from something. They're coming from some place. And being able to understand that has been so healing in terms of trauma. It's also been absolutely radical in terms of strategy. And it's very easy to get your prospects to take the steps that you want them to take if you can know where they're coming from and predict how they're going to react based on the things that you say or the offers that you make. And that's just like marketing and copywriting, and we do it all the time in our entrepreneurial endeavors, because we're objective, because we look at the data, we look at sales, we look at conversions. Once we have all of these metrics that we can be more interested in than the marketing itself, the stuff we write, we can detach from the words that we wrote and we just want to edit them so that conversions go up. It's the same thing here. Objectivity is the only thing. If you are the most powerful person in your life and you accept that nobody has more ability to create and affect change in your life than you do, but you also accept that power can corrupt and you have that power, so no one has a greater opportunity to fuck your life up than you do. That's just a fact. And I believe that the only reliable way that is going to work 100% of the time in 100% of cases is maintaining objectivity.